Hello and welcome to the Transform Introductory Webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, Product Manager for Alpha Transform, and I'm here to walk you through the key features of the system. Before we begin, just a quick explanation of why we built Transform to begin with. Here at Alpha, we've been creating business software tools and applications for decades, and we found that oftentimes applications we built for clients followed a specific pattern. Basically, organizations wanted apps that allowed people in the field or the shop floor to be able to quickly capture data, even if there's no Wi-Fi or cell signal. They also wanted to be able to organize, analyze, and act on the data they collect. The system had to be flexible, that is, programmable, to meet their specific needs, and it needed to tie into systems they already have. With those requirements in mind, Alpha Transform was born, and is now used across the world by a wide range of organizations. Today we're going to take you on a tour and show you how Alpha Transform can help you. We've divided this tour into sections, and each section will focus on a particular question, starting with, how do you collect information? But first a quick note. This tour might be more useful to you if you first either download the Alpha Transform mobile app, or if you sign up for a free account at transform.alphasoftware.com. So let's dive in, starting with data collection. In the example we're going to show, we're going to be using a web browser, but the instructions are the same if you're using the mobile app as well. So let's begin. We're here at the Alpha Transform web filler, which you can find online at transform.alphasoftware.com/webfiller. This uses the same username and password that you use to get into the mobile application and Transform Central. I'm going to go ahead and log in now. When I log in, if I have multiple accounts, I'll get to select them. If you just have one account, this screen will be skipped. Now it loads the latest form types, as well as the forms themselves for each of the form types. Now my account has a whole bunch of forms that I've already created, and I also have a whole bunch of form definitions that I've already defined. When you're brand new, you're not going to see anything in here. This section here is going to be blank completely. Even if you've created a form type, you still won't see it here. To fill in a new form type, what you're going to want to do is click the Add a Blank Form button here. But before we do that, let's take a look at this screen. This is the screen that lists all of the forms that have been downloaded onto your web browser here. And you can sort these forms using the sort command, which allows you to sort it by date, status form, and a combination of form and status. So for example, I have some forms that are the 5S type audit form. I have that set up so that I'm showing everything that has an open status, and then it's going to group together my 5S audit forms together, as well as my other form types together. So you can play with these to find out what selection makes sense for you. You can also filter them. You can take a look at only forms that have not yet been saved. In other words, ones that you've filled out but have not yet synchronized to the server. You can look for ones that have errors, that have error conditions marked on them, and I'll show you how to find those errors. You could show ones which have required fields that are missing, which is very similar to one which has errors. Or you could search also by the form types, and these only apply to the types of forms that you currently have downloaded into your system. If you don't have any instances of those forms, they won't appear here. So here you could check some of the forms you'd like, you'd hit the apply button, and you can apply the filter. When it's time to remove the filter, you just click filter again, you click clear all filters, and you click apply, and that brings you back. You can also collapse and expand the various sections if you do have multiple form types or multiple statuses and you have it sorted that way. I'm going to set it back to date, which is the default one. Now up here at the right, you'll see that there is a refresh button, and as soon as you log in to the Transform web filler, it brings down all of the instances that are there. But if you wait a few minutes, it's possible that someone has submitted a new form. So this is the button that you use to go up to the server to check to see if anything else has been downloaded. So I've clicked that button right now, and it came back with nothing. If there were forms, it would let you know how many forms were downloaded. Okay, so before we go to add a new form, let's take a look here in the menu. This hamburger menu over here on the left has got some options to help you out. One is, in fact, the help system itself. And if you click on the help system, it'll give you very detailed description of how to use basically everything here in the web filler. You can even show a table of contents and jump to a particular screen that you like. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of help. You also have options to refresh forms like you have here, refresh form definitions, which I'll show you on another page, and you can claim forms. This works if you have queues set up. So it's possible in Transform to set up what we know as queues. These are sort of buckets where you can put different forms in, and different people can log in if they're part of that group and claim a form from that queue. When they claim it from the queue, it disappears from the queue and it goes right here into the web filler for them to use it. User settings allow you to change things like your password and your name. Confirm login. Like Transform Central, every 2 days you will be logged out of this application automatically if you have not logged out beforehand. Now, you don't get fully logged out. You still have some functionality when you open up the app. You can still scroll through data. You can even create new records if you want to, but you won't be able to synchronize anything new up to the server until you confirm the login. And you can do that right here by saying confirm login. Log out, of course, logs you out of the application completely. Now let's say you wanted to add a new form. You can do that by clicking the Add a Blank Form. When you do that, the form types are listed here on this screen. If you've added a new form type recently and you don't see them on this screen, you'll want to refresh from server. That is the same as the menu choice you saw a moment ago called Refresh Definitions. To create a new form, I'm going to click on a particular form. I'm going to click on the delivery form. And then to fill it out, I just click here somewhere on the first line, and I'll type in a name. And then I use this arrow to move to the next screen. Delivery address, 123 Main Street. And using these arrows, I can move from field to field. Or, optionally, I could always just hit OK, which will take me back and show me what I've filled in, and I can click on another field in particular to fill it out. Like, let's say I want to click on city. So I'm going to click on city, and so on. You can capture a GPS location by clicking the Get Location button. This will be the location if you're working on a desktop or a laptop computer, probably that the wireless connection is connected to. So it does its best guess at guessing where you are. Since a mobile device actually has a GPS unit in it, most desktop and laptops don't. To capture a photo, you can use the webcam or you can capture a screenshot. And once you capture something, let's take a picture. So I'm going to allow to share my screen. And I'm going to, share this screen. I'm going to say take photo. Wow, that's kind of cool. And now I can say I want to use this photo. Now, one cool thing is once you've captured a photo or an image, you can use the pen and mark up that picture. When you use that pen icon, you have this little window up here. If you see what happens when I'm dragging it, it's magnifying the area below. So let's say I wanted to circle this area where it said take a photo. I can move that down there and I could tap on, let's say, a red colored ink, and let's choose one that's like medium thickness. And I can scroll right around like that, and I can save that. All right. When I'm done, I tap OK. I can do a signature here as well. If I had a touch screen, it would be easier, but I could sign with a mouse. And that's all there is to it. Now, sometimes when a form is designed, a submit button is placed at the bottom, and that's pretty good practice. In this case, we don't have one, but you can still submit that form either by going here to the menu and submitting it there, which would be change status, or you could go back here and say upload this to server, and that will actually upload it to the server. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now my change has been uploaded. Okay. Now that we're back at the list of forms, the form that you created will appear here in the list. Right now I have it sorted and filtered so it doesn't appear, but I'm going to go ahead and clear out the filter, and let's sort them by the form name. And I know I just filled in a delivery form, so let's scroll down to that, and here it is. And there's the data that we entered. Now let's go back to that list of forms again, and this time we're going to take a look for forms that have errors in them. The ones that have errors in them will be marked. For example, this one says that a required field is missing. Let's see if we have one which has a couple more errors. It'll have a better example. And this one has got a couple of problems in it. It has errors in it, and it has some missing data. And that's how the form was set up. So if the form doesn't have proper data entered into it, it's going to give you this error. If I click on this, you'll see that the error message actually appears here. And I can go up here to the hamburger menu and say list problems. And it's going to say the pulse rate is out of bounds, the start date is too soon, and there's no signature. Now the nice thing is I can click on any one of these. Let's set the pulse rate. So I'll set that to, let's say, let's make it reasonable, 75. And our error has gone away. There's an error here because there's no signature, so let's sign it. And now let's see what else I've got for issues. Oh, the date is too soon. It must be some day after today. So let's set a validation date of sometime in, let's take today, but spin it up to 2048. All right. And we'll click OK. Now at this point, I should be able to submit this form, and all of my errors will go away, and you'll see this appears now in a very light red. It's been basically grayed out. And that form can be submitted. When you submit a form, you get a choice to upload just the current form that you're on, but if you have multiple forms on your device that you haven't yet uploaded, you can choose to upload all of them. When I click OK, it takes the data, it sends it up, and it gives me back a response letting me know that the form was uploaded properly. And that covers the basics of the Transform Web Form Filler. Now that you've seen how data is collected, the next question is, how do you create your own types of forms so you can collect your own types of data? And for that, you're going to need a computer with a keyboard and mouse, because we're going to head over to Transform Central. So just point a browser to transform.alphasoftware.com, and we'll see how that's done. So this is the Designer tab, which is where you can design new types of forms and edit form types that you already have. My account has a few dozen forms already in it, but when you first start out, you're not going to see any forms in your account, so this will be blank, or you may have one or two forms, or a few more, that were included when you signed up for your account. If you want to create a new form type here at the screen, you just basically click this plus button up here, and you get a choice between selecting a template, which is a pre-made form, and if you click on it, you can choose from those form types here. I'm going to cancel out of that. Or you can create a brand new form by clicking Add Blank. Now, for forms that are already created, if you click on one of those forms, like let's say the 5S audit form, for example, you'll see that the screen is divided up into three areas. We have this properties area, which has to do with settings for the form itself. And we have a preview window over here on the right, which shows you what the form is going to look like. You can also change the size of that window if you choose to, for example, make it extra large or make it medium or small, so that you could simulate what it might look like on different sizes of phones or tablets. Now, you have all kinds of settings here under Basic Information and a few more under Advanced Features, and I'm going to run through those right now. We'll get to how you actually put the fields into the form in a different video, and that's on a different screen. So let's briefly go through the properties that you will find on a form. The form properties, and this doesn't include the fields that appear here, but the form properties include things like the title of the form, who's allowed to use the form, and some other things as well. When you first create a form, you'll want to give that form a display name. In this case, we're calling this one the 5S Audit. And you'll also want to give it a form ID. This will be assigned to you automatically if you leave it blank, but I find it's better to put in an ID that makes sense. Think of this as an abbreviated name, almost as if you were naming a file name. Down here, under Edit Form Commands, this is where you can go in and actually add the fields into your layout. And down here in Advanced Features, there's not a lot here that you're probably going to touch right away, but you'll be able to do a couple cool things like set the color and the icon that appears up here in this area. You can do that by clicking on that button. Enabling custom code, which is by default set to no, allows you to add TPL code to your application to give it a little bit more intelligence if you need to do that. Initial status has to do with whether this form, when you first create it, is set to open or submitted or pending or something like that, if you're using statuses in that way. And status role and permission groups are used to decide who's allowed to open the form, who's allowed to enter data into the form, who's allowed to see the form, and so on. That's actually set up in the Permissions tab, but once it's set in the Permissions tab, you then set that permission group right here in Designer. Down here, we have control over the heading and listing template, which gives you a little bit more control over how this is set up. Initialization commands allow you to set default values that'll be filled in as soon as someone creates a new instance of your form to fill out. And those are pretty much the ones you'll need to know. When you're first starting out, really the ones that you're probably going to be most interested in would be setting the color and the icon, setting the display name, and setting the form ID. We're here on the Designer tab, and in this video we're going to show you how to insert the fields and other commands that make up your form. On the Designer tab, typically what you'll see here is a list of form types, but when you double-click on a particular form type or click the Edit Form Commands button, what happens is you get to see a detailed view of that particular form, as we see here. Now, instead of showing forms, we look at the actual commands that make up this form. Starting up here, you'll see a lot of these are text fields. These are the most common types of fields. And anything that you put here will appear here in the preview window. Like the other preview windows, you can actually change the size to see how it'll appear on different screen sizes. Now, if you want to reorder fields because you put them in the wrong order or you need to move them around later, you can use these buttons to move them up and down. To delete a particular field, just click the Delete button. And to add a field, you can click the Add button. This is used for duplicating a current command. And we have Undo and Redo buttons in case you make a mistake. Let's take a look at some of the form commands that you can insert. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus button, and a menu here appears with all of the different types of form commands. The most common type is typed text, and in fact most of the fields here on this list fall into that category. Things like first name, addresses, city, state, those will all be text fields. We also have number fields. In fact, we have a couple different kinds. We have this plain number field. We have a signed number field, which allows you to put in negative values. We have integer. We have currency. And we also have phone number. That's not really a number, it's more of a text field, but it is formatted to hold a telephone number or a mobile phone number. You can also capture the date. You can capture the date plus the time element. There's a date field or time now field here that if you click on that will actually record as soon as that button is clicked. In fact, I'll go ahead and add one of those to show you what that does. It has a set to now button. You can actually change that. Let me go ahead and delete that. We'll go back to our list of commands. There's a stopwatch. You can add pictures. You can add audio. You can add a signature. You can add a barcode scan. You could do a GPS lookup or location. You can add a list of different choices for a user to select from. And that can also be displayed as a button list. So instead of using a drop-down list where you scroll through a list of choices, you click on the button that is appropriate. This is particularly good when you're using the mobile application because it's typically much easier to push a button than it is to open up a list and make a selection. You can format your form by using headings. There are 3 different types. There's the group, section, and instructions. They all have different sizes and weights. They're used for different reasons. The instruction one is used when you, on a particular form or field, if you would like to give the user an instruction on how to fill out that particular field. When you add an instruction, it adds a little question mark next to the field that they can tap on, and when you tap that, they'll see the instructions that you left them. You can also divide longer forms up into sections or even into pages, and you have the ability to jump to particular places on a form by defining a target and using a go-to-target command to jump right to that particular target. There's a countdown if you prefer to count down from a certain amount as opposed to using a stopwatch, which counts up. You can add your own buttons that will execute your own TPL code. And we have these if commands, which are good ways of hiding and showing forms and form commands when certain conditions are met. So, for example, if someone answers a question in a particular way and you'd like to have a follow-up question, you'd use an if command for that. Data groups are for where you're collecting a bunch of repeating types of data. So, for example, if you were building an invoice, each invoice item would be considered a datum item within a data group. HTML lets you specify your own HTML to display here in the form. You can also set an error indicator, which you use along with the if command. And then there's blank line, which is used here just to break up your form to make it easier for you to read. It does not appear in the final product. Now, one particular command, which is very interesting, isn't a command at all. It's called the Quick Start Style Input. When I click on that, you'll see that the screen changes and it gives me a blank page here. And in here, I can actually paste in a bunch of fields. Let's say that I had in the clipboard, and they will appear here, and it'll automatically create those fields for me, as you can see here in the preview window. If I wanted to change the type of field, I can do that as well. So let's say this employee photo, we don't want that to be a text field, we want that to be a photo type field. So I just move the cursor or click anywhere here on that line, move down to where I see photo, and I use the magic wand button to change it into a photo. The same we can do here with signature as well. When that's done, and I've made changes to my form, you can see that they are reflected here in the preview window. When I'm all set and I'm satisfied with how this is, and I'm not satisfied, I don't want to make those changes, so I'm going to click undo. You can go ahead and click Save Commands, and if you have made any changes, your form will appear here in orange with a little note indicating that it needs to be uploaded to Transform so that it can be accessed by the filler. Let me give you an example of that. If I double-click on Delivery, and let's say I change this from Recipient First Name to simply Recipient Name, and I click Done, it's going to say Click to Save Changes. You'll also notice that it has a mark right here on the left. And when I click to Save Changes, it's now up on the Transform server, and I can now see that form in the mobile application as well as in the web form filler. So you can now create your own forms, but how do you access the data once it's been collected? Well, in this next segment, we're going to show you how to use the Management Console to work with the records that you've collected. Then, in another segment, you'll see how to take the data and display it in a dashboard to show you a real-time view of what you have. We're here on the Management Console screen. Here you can review the data that's been collected, you can make edits to the data, export it, and more. Let's see how it works. When you begin, you won't see anything here on the left side because no records have been downloaded. So to do that, you're going to first choose the type of form that you would like. I have a bunch of forms here. The one I'm going to choose, Farmer's Worksheet. And when I choose it, it downloads the records. I only have 5 records. Now, it may happen that when you're choosing a form type, if you've just created that form type, you won't see it here in the list of forms. Make sure that you go down to the very bottom and click this refresh button to make sure that it grabs the latest list of forms. Okay. By clicking on a particular record, I can take a look at the data that is recorded into it. And if I'd like, I can actually edit some of that data by clicking the Editable Fields button and then choosing Edit. All right, so let's say I wanted to export some records. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. I could simply check on the ones that I wanted, and then I could say export checked forms only. I can also delete the forms if I wanted to. And for a particular form, I can take a look at any comments that have been entered. This feature isn't always used in all circumstances, but there is an option in the web form filler in which a comment can be added to a form, and this is where you would view those. Here's where you assign to whom the record belongs, and typically you do this using the email address of the user. Right now this is not assigned to anybody. So if they were to open up their web form filler or their mobile application, none of these records would appear. A record needs to be assigned to a person in order to appear on the list in the form fillers. You can also assign it to a person, but then set this property to prevention. So in other words, prevent the filler from downloading that record. That's often very good. For example, let's say a technician out in the field has filled in 100 records. They might not want to see the ones that they've already completed. So this can be set both automatically in the system or also here to yes to prevent that from happening. You could change the status of the form, so open, submitted, or any other statuses that you have defined. Over here, you'll be able to actually add a new record if you wanted to, and you can do this by just clicking Add New Field. And here it asks if you want to do a quick input or add one. Let's say we add one. And this is it. This is my blank field. And I can, just like before, go into Editable Fields, click on Edit, and I can fill in the values there. So back here in this list of forms, you'll notice that there's a section here called Details. This will probably be blank. You need to set this up when you define the form definition. So in this particular form, which I called the Farmer's Worksheet, if we went into the Designer and I selected the Farmer's Worksheet, you'll see it's one of the advanced options that you can use. So let's go down here, and you'll see I've created something called a listing template, and in it I've placed something called a name. There's more information on how to do this in other areas, but I just wanted to show you this is just a quick way to set this up. So let's go back to the Management Console, and you'll see because I had set that up as the listing template, it appears here in Details. Details is just one way that you could show some of the data from the form in the listing. The other way is by using the Select Fields option up here. When you choose Select Fields, you can come down here and select any of the fields that you would like to see. So let's say we wanted to do city and name, and we're going to go ahead and click off of here. And then when I refresh, you'll see that the information is now displayed here underneath each of these, and you can put in as many fields as you like. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and say export a form, we could click on the form that's selected, and I could say that I'd like to see that form in its basic format. That's basically the way it looks like on the phone. And I could download that as a PDF file, or I could email it. I could also look at it in JSON data, which might be helpful for developers, a plain table format, or a simple format. So the options here are yours. If you go with the tables format, you can download your data into Excel. So that's a useful thing to know. Let's go back into Done. And one more thing to point your attention to. Down here at the bottom, you can choose how many records are displayed. I only have about 5 of these types of records, so it really wouldn't make a difference what I set this page size to. But if I went over and I chose one that I have more records for, let's say the 5S audit, where I have about 300 and something, you'll see I'm only going to see the first 25, and I can adjust that here by changing the page size, say, to 100. So the maximum you can see on a page here is 250, and that's also the maximum that you would be able to export at that point as well. So you'd need to do those in batches if you had a bunch of them, or you could use the API. And one last thing, you won't find a find command here, so you can't search for a particular record. Instead, you would do that in the dashboard. The dashboard, besides having a collection of tiles with graphs and charts, also has a list very similar to Management Console, which you'll see if you look at the dashboard video. In this next segment, you'll see how to take the data that you've collected and turn it into useful information that you could see at a glance. Welcome to the Dashboard tab. This tab allows you to analyze the data that you've collected. It lets you spot trends, it lets you find anomalies, and it lets you find forms of particular interest among the data that you have collected. When you first start out, you'll see an account usage dashboard. This is the default dashboard for your account. It just shows basic information about who submitted forms and how many were submitted. It's a very basic dashboard, and you'll probably want to create one which is more detailed than this. But this is a helpful example to use when you're building out your own dashboards. You'll notice that the dashboard here is divided into tiles. This is a text type of tile, this is a list type of tile, and over here, and over here, and over here, we have some graph types of tiles. We can add or edit tiles, or even delete or rearrange them. When I click on the hamburger menu, I can go ahead, besides just reordering and deleting, I can hit the Edit Tile button, and I can change the style, and I can make changes to its functionality as well. Speaking of functionality, these are actually interactive types of graphs. So for example, if I wanted to see the 3 forms that this graph is referring to, I could simply click on it, and it'll bring me over to a interface, which you'll find very similar to the Management Console style of interface, in that you can select the records and take a look at them, you can export them, you can delete them, and so on. To get back to the dashboard, just click the Dashboard tab. When it's time to create a new dashboard, you can simply click the arrow next to the name of the dashboard. Here you'll see the dashboards that are listed for your account. You'll probably just have Account Usage Dashboard right now. But when you want to add a new dashboard, click the hamburger menu and select New Dashboard. You can also duplicate an existing dashboard and share a dashboard so that the dashboard is available to other users in your account. The dashboard also has another cool feature, and that is the ability to be a heads-up type of display. When you go into the list of dashboards, you'll see there's an option here called Auto Refresh. When you select Auto Refresh, it takes the current dashboard and it removes the Chrome from the outside of it, as you'll see in a minute. So it removes the graphics that are up here so that it can be displayed full screen. This is ideal for presenting up-to-the-minute information in a public screen, on a factory floor, or in an office. To get back into the regular Transform Central, you just click Hide and it'll bring you back into the Dashboard tab. Now that you've seen how to collect data, build forms, and manage the data that you collected, it's time to take a look at your Transform account and the various settings you have available. We'll do that on the Home tab, as you'll see here in the next segment. As the account owner, or admin, you're going to spend some time here in Transform Central. Think of it as the operations center for Transform. This is where you can add users to your account, design new forms, review and process the data you've collected, and a lot more. So let's run through these settings now, and I'd like to start by drawing your attention to the top right of the screen. Up here you'll see my name, my account name, and the amount of time left in the session. For security reasons, you need to re-log in to Alpha Transform every 2 days. So when your login expires, just click anywhere in this area to log back in. Now let's go over to the left side of the screen and look at the options there, and we'll go through them one by one. Alright, so over here on the left we have the various settings that you have for your account. The display name, that's the name that appears up here and will appear on your forms as well. Change password, I think you probably know what that does. Change preferences, that one's kind of interesting. When you click on Change Preferences, you can decide, think of this more as like the notifications area. This is where you could decide whether or not you want to be alerted by SMS or by email if a new form is assigned to you. All you do here is just basically turn on the options that you like, fill in a phone number, and that's all you need to do. Okay, so down here to Account Settings is next. And this is where you enter in a license key if you have a paid account, which goes beyond, say, the free or the free tier or the trial account. Account name, right now mine is called Dave Experiments, but you can name it anything that you like. And keep in mind, as a user, you can have multiple accounts. So you can go ahead and click this, for example, and say create a new account, give it a new name, and using your same username and password, you'll see that account in your list of accounts when you log in. Change preferences is used basically for setting up those notifications I talked about a moment ago. So when an SMS message is sent to you or an email message is sent to you, you can decide how that's formatted. We already have that set up for you, so you may not have to change this at all. But if you want to customize it later on, that's where it lives. So change preferences. Next up, under user management, this is where you're going to add users to your account. All you need to do is just put in their email address, click add user, and they will get an invitation. If they don't already have a Transform account of their own, in other words, they don't have a username and password, they'll be prompted to create one. If they do, for example, they already have a Transform account, then they'll be prompted to join your account. Delete reorder users, that just removes people from your account and puts them in a different order. Manage user roles, that one's kind of interesting. That allows you to decide what each person on your account is allowed to do. Are they allowed to fill in forms? Are they allowed to go to Management Console and look at the data that's been collected and all of that? That's all controlled here under the Permissions tab, but this is where you set it up under Manage User Roles. And then over here, invite users. You're probably not going to use this unless you're a big enterprise and you want to invite a whole bunch of people at the same time. It's a really advanced feature which actually lets you create a whole bunch of accounts at the same time. It lets you automatically put them into user roles. It lets you set their passwords and things like that. So again, an advanced feature. If you're just adding a few people to your account at a time, you're just going to use the add users to account here under user management. The last three are really for developers for doing a little bit more advanced things in Transform. So for under developer options, for example, we have get API key and revoke API key so that you can make calls into the Transform system to do really all kinds of things. You can create forms, you can add users, you can retrieve data and other things. We have some built-in what we call on-submit events. These are things that happen when a form is saved. So you can actually write that back to a SQL database. You can send an email. You can create a report. You can save a copy to Google or to Dropbox. There's some other things you can do as a developer. For integrations, we won't really cover these here. Again, a more advanced feature. Zapier is a really cool third-party workflow system that we work with. And connected applications is just where you set up account criteria when you are using some of these developer options here. And then down here, more where we have dispatch forms and release notes. Dispatch forms is for sending a whole bunch of forms at once to a whole bunch of different users. An advanced feature that we will cover later on. Release notes just tell you what happened in the latest version of Transform. So I hope that sort of demystifies it. The only ones you're really going to need at first are going to be your display name. You'll probably want to change that. You may want to change preferences when it comes to how you are being notified. And you may want to change your account name. In fact, you probably do, as you'll get an account name that looks something like account number, 5722. You'll probably want to give that a sensible name. And then you'll want to add some users to your account. Okay, so now you can manage your account and collect and manage data. There are lots of other great parts of Transform to cover, though. One of which is its built-in programming language, which lets you add any functionality you can dream of to your forms. Things like barcode scanning or even API calls to AI assistants are all possible. Transform's programming language, or TPL, is documented right in the software itself, so we won't cover it in this video. What we will cover, though, is another advanced feature, one that doesn't require any programming, and that's Transform's role-based permission system. This allows you to lock down parts of the Transform system so that only users with correct privileges have access to certain forms and features. And in this next segment, you'll see how it all works. Alpha Transform has a built-in permission system to restrict access to forms and data so that they are only accessible by authorized people. You may already be familiar with the permission system from the Manage User Roles section of the Home tab, where you can assign one or more roles to different users. Back here on the Permissions tab, you have fine control over how those roles work. The tab is divided into 4 panes. Let's look at the Roles pane here at the bottom left. 6 roles have been predefined for you when the account was created, and each of these roles have certain permissions associated with them. Above the role pane is the statuses pane. Every form has a field that's called status, which you can use to indicate where a form is in your workflow. 4 statuses are created for you by default when your account was created. To the right of those panes is the pane in the middle. It's called the Combined Group Status Role Permission List. But don't be scared by the long name. It's easy to use once you see how it works. This pane ties together roles with statuses and permissions to form a group. When your account is created, 2 groups are created for you. The first is called Simple Group, and below that is another one called Form with Approval. Let's look at the default group, which is named Simple Group. This is used with all of your forms unless you specify otherwise in the Form Designer. At the top of the Simple Group are 2 controls, which are used to determine which kind of forms a user is allowed to view or create. Below these controls, notice how Simple Group is divided into 4 equal sections, one for each of the statuses. Now each of these are further divided by roles. And if you click on a role in a section in a group, you'll see the permissions that apply here in the pane on the right. Setting permissions is then just a matter of checking boxes. So for example, if a person with the role of user is on a form marked as open, they're allowed to use the mobile app to list forms, edit forms, and delete forms. They can also change the status of a form from open to submitted, but they don't have permissions to do anything in the management console. On the other hand, the account administrator may have permissions to do everything, like they do here. Okay, so the last thing to know, we've already seen that your account has 2 permission groups in it, but the default one is always used unless you specify otherwise. So here's how you specify otherwise. On the Design tab, choose the form you want and expand the Advanced Features section here in the Form Properties pane. Then click the Status Role Permission Groups box and choose the permissions group you would like to use. If you leave it blank, it will use the default one. That about covers it for the Permissions tab, but if you have more questions, click on the Help link for more detailed information. So far you've seen settings, security, permissions, data collection, dashboards, and more, and there are loads of other features. It can automatically generate reports, send emails and SMS messages, and it can connect to virtually any system you already have. When it comes to power, flexibility, and ease, Transform is hard to beat. Get your free account at transform.alphasoftware.com or email us at tfservice@alphasoftware.com. Thanks for watching.